The year was 1745, and the Kingdom of Poland lay divided, bruised, and strangled between empires. Yet within its noble houses there still burned a fierce and restless flame, a love of freedom so powerful it could not be conquered by any crown. And in the halls of Warka, in the Mazovian countryside, that flame took human form, in a boy named Casimir Pulaski. He was born into privilege, but not comfort. His father, Joseph Pulaski, was a stern and noble patriot, a man who believed that a sword was not merely an ornament, but a duty. Their family name carried honor, and with it, danger. The Pulaskis were not content to bow before tyranny. As a child, Casimir would stand by the window of his family's estate, watching soldiers ride across the fields, their armor glinting in the sun. He felt it even then, the pull of destiny, the call to fight for something greater than life itself. By his teenage years, his father sent him to study the art of war. He learned horsemanship, strategy, and the old chivalric codes. But the young Pulaski was not content with books or ceremony. He wanted battle. He wanted the world to burn with the same fire that burned in him. That fire would soon find its battlefield. In 1768, when Pulaski was just 23, Poland erupted in resistance. The Confederation of Bar, a movement of nobles who refused to kneel before Russia's domination, took up arms to defend their country's freedom and faith. Among them rose Casimir Pulaski, tall, fierce, and unafraid. While many older lords spoke of caution, Pulaski demanded action. He rode at the front of the charge, his saber flashing, his voice carrying over the gunfire, rallying men twice his age. His courage made him a legend, even among his enemies. For 2 years, he led daring raids against overwhelming Russian forces. His cavalry struck like thunder, appearing from the forests, vanishing before the muskets could reload. He became known for his speed, discipline, and audacity, commanding loyalty through courage, not birthright. But bravery has a price. By 1771, the Polish resistance was crushed. Betrayal and blood filled the streets of Warsaw. Pulaski was accused, falsely, of plotting against the Polish king, Stanislav II August. With enemies closing in and a price on his head, Pulaski was forced to flee his homeland. He left behind his family's estates, his wealth, his flag, everything. He crossed borders under false names, hunted as an outlaw. In one night of storm and smoke, he looked back for the last time upon the Polish plains, whispering, "If I cannot fight for Poland's freedom, then I will fight for freedom wherever it lives." Exile is a cruel fate for a soldier. For years he wandered across Europe, in Turkey, France, and Germany, a sword without a country. He lived in taverns and cheap inns, trading war stories with mercenaries, always restless, always searching. But fate, it seemed, was not finished with him. In 1776, while revolution blazed across the Atlantic, word reached him of a new nation being born, a nation that dared to challenge kings, that spoke of liberty as a right, not a privilege. And among those who had heard of Pulaski's courage was Benjamin Franklin, then serving as America's diplomat in Paris. Franklin wrote to him, offering a chance to fight again, not for a crown, but for an ideal. It was the letter that changed everything. Pulaski read it by candlelight in a Paris inn. His hands trembled slightly as he whispered the words aloud. To General Casimir Pulaski, your valor and skill are needed in the service of liberty. The American cause is the cause of all mankind. The words struck him like thunder. He rose from his chair, eyes blazing, and said to the startled innkeeper, "Tell them, the son of Poland rides for freedom once more." And so began his journey, from the ashes of Poland to the battlefields of America. A soldier without a country, but with a cause greater than any nation. He would fight not for land or crown, but for the dream of liberty itself. The Polish flame that had nearly died in exile was burning again, brighter than ever. Paris, 1777. The City of Lights was alive with whispers of revolution. In salons and coffee-houses, Philosophers spoke of liberty, scientists dreamed of progress, and soldiers without nations dreamed of redemption. In one dimly lit tavern, a lone figure sat by the fire, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that carried both pride and sorrow. It was Casimir Pulaski, the Polish exile who had once defied an empire. His uniform was faded, his boots worn, but his spirit was unbroken. Then came the man who would change his fate, Benjamin Franklin. Franklin, serving as America's representative in France, had heard the tales. A young Polish commander who had fought the Russians with unmatched courage, whose cavalry moved like ghosts, whose sword had written legends on the fields of Bar. The two men met quietly in a corner of the tavern. Franklin spoke softly, yet his words burned brighter than any flame. "General Pulaski," he said, "the struggle you began in Poland lives again in America. We fight for the same freedom, not for kings, but for mankind. Come to us. Help us teach our soldiers what true courage means." Pulaski listened in silence, his gaze fixed on the flickering fire. He thought of his homeland, lost, of his brothers, buried, of his cause, betrayed. And then he nodded. "If liberty still breathes anywhere on this earth," he said, "then I will fight for it. Tell your General Washington that I come, not as a mercenary, but as a brother." The voyage to America was brutal. Storms tore at the ship as it crossed the Atlantic. The winds howled like the ghosts of fallen comrades. But Pulaski stood on the deck, face to the rain, watching the endless horizon. He was not sailing away from home. He was sailing toward purpose. When he arrived in Boston in July 1777, the war had entered its darkest hours. The Continental Army was battered, outnumbered, and weary. But when the foreign soldier stepped onto American soil, his boots sinking into the mud, he felt the pulse of freedom beneath his feet. Pulaski wasted no time. He rode to meet General George Washington, then encamped near the Brandywine River in Pennsylvania. The first meeting between the two men was legendary. Washington, tall and composed, looked upon the foreign officer with curiosity. Pulaski bowed, his accent thick but his conviction clear. "I came here where freedom is being defended," he said, "to serve it and to live or die for it." Washington studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "We shall see, General. We shall see." But it wouldn't take long for America to see his worth. Weeks later, in September 1777, the British Army launched a surprise attack at Brandywine Creek. Washington's lines began to crumble. Confusion spread like wildfire. The British cavalry charged. The American flank was collapsing. Pulaski saw it from a hilltop. Without orders, he mounted his horse, drew his saber, and charged headlong into the chaos. His voice thundered over the battlefield, sharp, commanding, alive. "Follow me! Ride for Washington!" Dozens of American riders followed, inspired by his fearlessness. Pulaski's cavalry smashed into the British flank, buying Washington the precious minutes needed to regroup and retreat. It was a desperate act, and it saved the army. For the first time, American soldiers saw what true cavalry could do: the speed, the precision, the unity of man and horse in motion. It was not just a charge, it was a message. Freedom needed courage as fierce as fire. When the smoke cleared, Washington approached him and said quietly, "General Pulaski, you have saved the American army today." And from that moment, Casimir Pulaski became a legend, the foreign knight who had ridden through cannon smoke to save a new nation. He would be promoted soon after, becoming Brigadier General of the American Cavalry, tasked with building what America had never truly possessed, a disciplined, modern cavalry. But for Pulaski, this was not about rank or title. It was about purpose. At last, the warrior who had lost his homeland had found a new one, not bound by borders, but by ideals. As he looked across the American plains, he whispered to himself in Polish, "The soil is foreign, but the freedom is familiar." And from that moment, His life and blood belonged to the United States of America. The rain had turned the ground to mud. The American camps stretched thin across the Pennsylvania hills, weary from retreat and hunger. Yet among the soldiers, whispers spread, whispers of the tall, fearless foreigner who rode with the storm and saved General Washington's army at Brandywine. They said he fought like lightning. They said he rode as if born of the wind. They said his saber gleamed like vengeance itself. His name passed from campfire to campfire. Casimir Pulaski, the Polish noble who had defied kings, crossed oceans, and now fought beneath a flag that was not yet a nation. In the early days of 1778, George Washington summoned him to headquarters. The general had seen enough. Pulaski's courage at Brandywine had not only saved the army, it had inspired it. Washington looked at the tall, sharp-featured man before him. "General Pulaski," he said, "America owes you more than words. I wish to place you where your talents can serve best, in command of the cavalry." Pulaski bowed deeply. "I accept, sir, but I ask for one thing, the freedom to build it my way." Washington's expression softened. He had seen what Pulaski could do with disorganized troops. He nodded slowly. "Then let it be done. Form us a cavalry worthy of liberty." And thus, in February 1778, by order of Congress, Casimir Pulaski was made Brigadier General and Chief of the American Cavalry. But when Pulaski arrived at his new command, he found chaos. Horses were untrained, supplies scarce, and soldiers without discipline. Some had never ridden before. They were brave but raw. Pulaski looked at them, farmers, blacksmiths, tailors, boys with calloused hands and no armor. He dismounted, walked among them, and said in his heavy accent, "You will not fight like knights, but you will ride like thunder." From dawn until dusk, he drilled them relentlessly. He taught them how to move as one body, how to strike fast and vanish before the enemy could react. He introduced European tactics, formations unseen in the colonies, merging speed, precision, and surprise. He trained them to ride with grace and fury. He made them soldiers of steel and soul. Soon, they began to move differently, their lines sharp, their morale fierce. The ragged riders of America were becoming Pulaski's legion, an elite strike force that would carry the name of liberty wherever the wind took them. But before Pulaski could perfect his legion, war found him. In October 1778, Pulaski led his newly formed cavalry to Egg Harbor, New Jersey. British troops and Loyalists had been raiding coastal settlements, and Pulaski's men were sent to stop them. The night was dark and wet, the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder and salt. Pulaski's camp lay hidden among the dunes. His men slept lightly, horses restless. But unbeknownst to them, a British Loyalist spy had betrayed their position. At midnight, musket fire shattered the silence. Flames tore through the camp. Men scrambled from their tents as bullets whistled past. Horses reared in terror. Pulaski, already awake, leapt to his saddle. His voice cut through the chaos. "Form ranks. Hold your ground." He charged straight into the ambush, saber flashing under the moonlight. The British expected confusion. They got fury. Though outnumbered, Pulaski's riders counterattacked with ferocity. They fought through smoke and sand, cutting through the enemy like a storm. But it was too late to save the camp. Egg Harbor was a brutal night. Many of Pulaski's men fell, their tents and stores burned. Still, Pulaski rode out alive, his sword bloodied but unbroken. And though the skirmish was small, his valor spread through the ranks of the Continental Army. They began to call him something new, the Knight of Liberty. After Egg Harbor, Congress allowed him to form his own independent cavalry unit, the Pulaski Legion. It would be a blend of infantry and cavalry, modeled after the fast, mobile forces of Europe. He gathered men from across nations, Americans, Poles, Germans, Frenchmen. Soldiers who had nowhere else to go, but something to prove. They trained harder than any other unit. Pulaski drilled them not just in combat, but in discipline. He rode with them daily, his voice echoing across the fields. Courage without order is chaos. Speed without control is death. But when courage and order ride together, no army can stand before them. His legion's banner was red, with a golden eagle, the symbol of both Poland and freedom. Wherever it flew, hope rose among the ranks. He funded his legion from his own purse, spending what little wealth he had left from his noble days. He slept in tents beside his soldiers, ate their meager rations, and shared in their hardships. They followed him not just because he commanded, but because he believed. He wasn't an American by birth, but by choice. And that choice burned brighter than any flag. By 1779, Pulaski's legion had become the spear of the Revolution's southern front. Sent to South Carolina to defend Charleston against British attack, Pulaski rode through the swamps and backroads with relentless determination. The heat was suffocating, the terrain unforgiving. But Pulaski's riders learned to move like shadows, striking supply lines, ambushing patrols, disappearing before the enemy could react. When Charleston came under siege, Pulaski led the counterattack himself. He fought not from behind the lines, but at the front, always first to charge, always last to retreat. His horse was shot from under him twice. His cloak was torn by musket fire. Yet he refused to yield. An American soldier later wrote, "Pulaski rode as if death were afraid of him." By now, even the British had learned his name, and feared it. To them, Pulaski was the foreign devil on horseback, the man who appeared from nowhere and vanished into the trees like a ghost. But beyond battle, Pulaski's influence reshaped the very idea of American cavalry. Before him, riders were merely scouts or messengers. After him, they were a weapon, swift, organized, deadly. His teachings became the foundation of American mounted warfare. His methods, shock tactics, flanking maneuvers, rapid redeployment, would echo in every cavalry charge of future wars. George Washington once wrote to Congress, "General Pulaski's knowledge and zeal are of the greatest benefit to our cause." Pulaski had not only earned Washington's respect, he had earned his friendship. And though still an outsider, Pulaski began to feel something he hadn't known since the days of the Bar Confederation: belonging. In America, he found not just a war, but a purpose that made the blood in his veins feel noble again. As 1779 turned to autumn, one final campaign awaited, a battle that would decide his destiny and immortalize his name. He would ride one last time into the heart of cannon fire, not for a crown, not for a nation, but for freedom itself. The year was 1779. The American Revolution burned in its fiercest stage. The northern states had survived, but the South was bleeding. Savannah, Georgia, had fallen into British hands, and the dream of liberty was fading under the red banner of the crown. But then, across the storm of despair, came a voice, a foreign voice, proud and defiant. General Casimir Pulaski was not ready to let America die. He had fought for freedom in Poland, watched it crushed beneath foreign boots, and now he would not see liberty die again in this new land he had come to love. He rode to Savannah with his legion, fewer than 300 men, but warriors forged in fire. Alongside him marched the French army under Count d'Estaing, allies sent by King Louis XVI. The combined forces, American and French, planned to retake Savannah from the British in a massive assault. When Pulaski arrived, the air itself seemed thick with tension. The swamps reeked of decay, and British cannon thundered from the city walls day and night. He rode among the lines, his black horse gleaming under the southern sun, his uniform dusty but proud. Soldiers cheered when they saw him. His name had become legend already. To them, Pulaski was more than a man. He was the spirit of resistance itself. His presence was courage. His gaze was command. Yet behind his calm face, Pulaski saw the danger. The Allied forces were uncoordinated. The French officers distrusted the Americans. The Americans were wary of foreign leadership. Pulaski, understanding both worlds, tried to bridge them. He met with Washington's envoys, advised the French generals, and pushed for unity. "We fight for the same liberty," he said. "Let not pride make us slaves again." But pride was not easily silenced. And time was running out. On the morning of October 9, 1779, as dawn crept through the mist, the decision was made. The Allies would storm the British defenses. It was a desperate plan, a frontal attack on entrenched positions, defended by British regulars and Loyalist troops under General Prevost. But Pulaski knew that hesitation was death. He looked toward the city, the spires of Savannah faint against the smoke, and whispered to himself in Polish, "If I must fall, let it be on the soil of freedom." He rode to his men, the Pulaski Legion, proud and battle-scarred. Their horses pawed the ground, restless and ready. Pulaski raised his saber high. "Brothers," he cried, "today we fight not for Poland, nor for France, but for the liberty of mankind. Ride with me, and let the world remember that we lived like lions." The men cheered, the sound echoing like thunder across the marshes. At sunrise, the assault began. French drums rolled, and ranks of blue-coated soldiers advanced through smoke and fire. American troops, led by brave officers like General McIntosh and Colonel Lawrence, surged forward beside them. Cannonballs screamed overhead. Musket volleys tore through the fog. The air filled with the smell of powder and blood. Pulaski watched from horseback, his face grim. The attack was faltering. The troops were bogged down by mud, confusion, and relentless British fire. He could see the line breaking. He could hear the cries of the wounded. He knew that if they fell back now, the revolution itself might crumble. So he made his choice. He spurred his horse forward and called to his cavalry, "With me. Follow me. Ride for liberty." And with that, General Casimir Pulaski charged straight into the storm. The scene was chaos, smoke so thick it hid the sun, men falling by the dozens, cannon roars shaking the ground. But through it all came the thunder of hooves, Pulaski and his legion charging full speed toward the British batteries. Musket fire ripped through the ranks. Horses screamed. Men were thrown from saddles. Yet Pulaski rode on, his saber raised, cloak flying like a banner of defiance. Witnesses later said he seemed unstoppable, a vision of fury and grace, his eyes burning with the light of destiny. He reached the front lines, where the cannon stood like iron beasts. He was rallying his men, shouting orders. "Forward! Take the guns! Freedom or death!" Then a single cannon roared. A blast of iron and flame. Pulaski's horse reared and collapsed. The general fell to the ground, his body torn by grape-shot. His men rushed to him, shouting his name. "General! General Pulaski!" He tried to speak, his voice faint, lips stained with blood. Go on, my brothers! Finish the fight!" They carried him from the field, the battle raging around them. The attack failed. Savannah would remain in British hands. But that charge, that single act of fearless sacrifice, became one of the most unforgettable moments of the Revolution. Pulaski was taken aboard an American ship, the Wasp, anchored off the Georgia coast. Surgeons worked to save him, but his wound was mortal. For 2 days, he drifted in and out of consciousness. He refused morphine, asked only for word of his soldiers. When told that his men had survived and fought bravely, he smiled weakly. "Then, I die content," he whispered. On October 11, 1779, Casimir Pulaski breathed his last. He was 34 years old. His comrades wept. Some accounts say he was buried at sea. Others claim he was laid to rest in Savannah soil. Wherever his body lies, his spirit became one with the land he died for. In the years that followed, America never forgot the foreign knight who had given everything for her freedom. George Washington mourned his loss deeply, writing, Pulaski is an officer whose bravery and enterprise are beyond praise. His name was etched into the story of America itself. Towns, counties, and even fortresses were named in his honor. In the centuries to come, every U.S. cavalryman would ride in his shadow. In 1929, Congress made it official. General Casimir Pulaski was declared an honorary citizen of the United States, one of only a handful in history. From the hills of Poland to the fields of Georgia, his spirit became a bridge between nations, between two peoples bound by the same love for freedom. He was Polish by birth, said one historian, but American by heart. And in the hearts of all who ride for justice, his legend lives on. The knight who rode across the sea to fight for a dream. The soldier who found a new homeland in the fires of war. The man who became the immortal father of the American cavalry. The battlefields of the Revolution slowly fell silent. Smoke drifted away. Muskets grew cold. But in the hearts of men, a fire still burned. It was the fire Pulaski had carried across an ocean. A flame of courage, sacrifice, and undying love for freedom. Though his body was gone, his legend refused to rest. News of General Casimir Pulaski's death spread through the camps like a whisper of grief. From the Carolinas to Pennsylvania, soldiers who had never met him spoke his name with reverence. They remembered the tall foreigner with the proud bearing, the man who rode fearlessly into enemy fire, the one who had come not to conquer, but to serve. In Philadelphia, members of Congress rose in silence. Letters of sorrow poured from officers across the continent. General Washington himself wrote, "The loss of General Pulaski cannot be too much regretted. His valor, zeal, and active service have left a void that no man can fill." Among the ranks of the Continental Army, his men wore black armbands. His legion carried his banner one last time in parade, before folding it, blood-stained and torn, to be kept as a sacred relic. For America, he was no longer a stranger. He had become a martyr of liberty. Far away, in the quiet plains of Poland, the news reached the land he had once called home. To his countrymen, Pulaski was already a hero, a freedom fighter who had risen against tyranny and paid the price. Now they learned that their lost son had found a new cause, and died for another people's freedom. Across Polish villages, candles were lit in his memory. Mothers told their children of the noble knight who rode beyond the sea to fight for justice. Pulaski had become more than Polish. He had become universal. A symbol of what it means to fight not for borders, but for ideals. He died a free man, one Polish poet wrote, and in dying made two nations brothers forever. Years turned to decades. The revolution ended, liberty triumphed, and a new nation rose from the ashes. But wherever American cavalry rode, through wars, plains, and distant lands, Pulaski's name rode with them. Fortresses, towns, and counties were named Pulaski, in Georgia, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and beyond. Each was a whisper of his name carried forward by generations who never saw his face, but felt his spirit. In 1825, when Lafayette, another foreign hero of the Revolution, returned to visit the young United States, he stood before Pulaski's monument and saluted. "He fought not for reward, nor for glory," Lafayette said, "but for mankind." In the early 20th century, Americans of Polish descent built churches and schools in his honor. Statues of him rose across cities, New York, Washington, Chicago, each depicting a man on horseback, eyes fixed toward the horizon, forever charging. And then, in 1929, on the 150th anniversary of his death, the U.S. Congress granted Casimir Pulaski honorary American citizenship. It was an act both symbolic and sacred, a final recognition that this foreign son had earned his place among the founders of the nation he had died for. Only a handful in history had received such an honor. Pulaski's name was etched beside those who shaped America's soul. Yet even in death, mystery surrounded him. Some said he was buried at sea from the deck of the Wasp. Others believed his body lay beneath the soil of Savannah. In the 20th century, excavations revealed bones believed to be his, bones that told a strange secret. The skeleton structure suggested Pulaski might have been intersex, biologically unique, neither fully male nor female. But to history, it changed nothing. For courage knows no gender. And Pulaski's bravery was unquestionable, written in the blood and dust of revolution. His remains, whatever their truth, were reburied with military honors. Cannons fired, flags lowered, and across the ocean, both America and Poland mourned him once again. Centuries later, in every parade on Pulaski Day, Polish and American flags fly side by side. Children wave banners. Veterans salute. And somewhere, in the echo of drums and the beat of hooves, the spirit of the cavalry rides again. They ride for the same ideals Pulaski died for. For liberty, for brotherhood, for the right to live as free men and women under heaven. Every soldier who charges into danger for a cause greater than himself carries a spark of that same fire. A fire that crossed the Atlantic in one man's heart and set a new world ablaze. In the final reckoning of history, Casimir Pulaski stands not as a foreign hero, but as a universal symbol of freedom. He was born in Poland, fought for France, and died for America, yet he belonged to none of them alone. He belonged to every soul who ever dared to fight tyranny and ride toward justice. He had no homeland when he came to America. But when he fell at Savannah, he gave America a soul that will never fade. Freedom has no borders, Pulaski once wrote. Only those brave enough to defend it. That is the legacy of General Casimir Pulaski, the father of the American cavalry. A man who rode into legend and never stopped riding.